Well, good morning, everybody. You may be listening to this lesson in the morning, or it might be in the afternoon. I know these four classes rather, are scheduled for Thursday and Friday at the 10 a.m. session. And I thank you for joining us here at Brown Street. I am the pulpit minister here at Brown Street, and I'm thankful that you are in attendance with us, at least virtually, and hopefully you'll get some good from these wonderful lessons that so many have been presenting. And I'm thankful to be a part of this. I have been preaching for about 45 years, at least in the ministry, and I have served as an elder in the past for a period of 8 years. And some of you that have been serving much, much longer than that probably think you got ties older than that, and that's okay. But I do want you to know I appreciate greatly what you're doing in the service to the kingdom and for the kingdom and shepherding souls. And I hope that this class today will be a benefit to you because I love elders. Everywhere I have served, I have loved my elders. We've had wonderful relationships. And I want you to know that you are greatly appreciated for your time that you give to the Lord's church and for your wonderful wives that support you and oftentimes go home on Wednesday nights and Sunday nights by themselves, and you're busy doing kingdom work. So I want you to know how much I appreciate you very much. I'm reminded of a little story that I heard not long ago about a young minister, or rather a young elder who had just been introduced to the church that was going to serve as an elder. And he was pretty young to serve, but the people of the church felt like he met all the qualifications, demonstrated all the things scripturally, and so he was installed as an elder. And so one of the older men in the church had a family that he had been dealing with, and there was going to be a counseling session that was going to take place between one of the members of that family. And the older elder thought it would be a wonderful thing if he was just to take this younger man with him and have him have an experience of that first time to be involved in a counseling session where there had been some sin involved, and all sin is serious. And so this older elder took this new elder with him who was much younger, and they met with this person, and there was a great deal of discussion. There was a lot of crying and a lot of heartache, and then there was a lot of confessing of wrong. And so when the session was over, of course, they prayed, and as they were leaving, this younger man came to the older elder and asked him, he said, well, how did you think I did? How do you think we handled that and my comments? And the older elder looked at him, put his hand on his shoulder, and he said, son, you really did good, but when people confess their sins, you've just got to quit saying, wow, wow, wow. So I don't know if anybody here fits that category or not, but sometimes there are all kinds of things that we hear as elders and we're amazed, but we do know that people are people. And things happen and sin comes into people's lives. And one of the things we do in shepherding the flock particularly makes me think about all the things that have happened in the last year. It is really hard for me to imagine, but it was last March, a year ago, that many congregations stopped meeting. They went to virtual services like we're still doing here in this workshop. And so we have had a whole year, an entire year of many Bible classes not meeting. Our children have not had Bible study on a consistent basis for a year. And so we do know that we have some issues, and our little babies, all the way from nursery, all the way up through the 12th grade, our college, young professionals, and even adult classes probably will be behind the 8 ball now, thinking seriously about how can we help people to catch up with what's going on. So I want you to know I'm here for you today because I love you, and I appreciate this committee asking me to be a part of this class. And so I'd like, if you will, to open your Bibles to the book of Matthew, chapter 9 and verse 36. Jesus said these words, seeing the crowds, he felt compassion for them. Jesus Christ indeed was a compassionate man. Just as elders must be compassionate and learn to work on those things, Jesus is the great example for us of being compassionate. The Bible goes on to say, because they were distressed and downcast like sheep without a shepherd. We have a lot of people in the church not talking about just here at Brown Street, but in congregations where you are, where you serve as a shepherd, that probably are out wandering around like sheep without a shepherd. And we need to guard against that. There are several words that came to my mind. If you're taking notes today, maybe write these words down. They're just little bullet words, and you think about them as this lesson is over and you contemplate it. But one of the things that I have seen over the last year is a little bit of what we would call chaos. That sometimes there is a little chaos going on in the church to where people are running around in every direction. There's no direction that's given. In fact, many services have been canceled. They're tossed to and fro by the great deceiver of this world. And then we just simply say that their life is chaotic. And as elders, shepherds must help to bring this flock back together to where we can see unity and people working together. And that is vital. And unfortunately or fortunately, this falls on your shoulders as an elder to help to lead and guide and direct that flock. And I know you know that, but I just wanted to say it today. Another word that came to my mind, or two words, is that of no direction. That there's not been a lot of direction with a lot of elders, and it's difficult. And you might be sitting there saying, well, our church is the exception to the rule. Well, good on you. I'm glad about that. That is a wonderful thing. But many, there has not been any direction. They don't know where they're supposed to be going. Many have probably lost their drive. They've lost their passion, and they've lost their direction since last year. Another thing that I thought about was, like sheep without a shepherd, is there's no food. There's no food, spiritual food, that's been given out. And maybe meeting on Sunday morning only is all that we could do for a while. But thank God we're beginning to open up a little bit now, and we'll be able to do some things differently in the days to come. But how long can the human body live without physical food? I want you to think about these stats. I looked these up not long ago, and I want you to think about the human body, how long a person can live without sustenance, without food. One critical factor, of course, is the starting weight. Now, I can't see everybody in the class and everybody that's looking, but some of us probably could live a little bit longer than others. I know I fit in that category. But if you're an average weight person and you think about your body and how long you might could live, it is generally assumed that they can tolerate a weight loss up to 18%, and maybe some even tolerate a weight loss of 20%. In terms of normal body fat, being able to handle the stresses and the strains without having sustenance in their life, the average person can only live between 30 and 50 days. 30 and 50 days. Well, we've had over 365 days of churches not meeting on a regular basis and having issues, and I'm not here to complain or condemn anybody, but I'm just saying we've got to move forward now and help these sheep that are struggling. And so other factors may play a role during that time. This was shocking to me, that women survive longer than men in times of crisis, of famine, that women live longer. And I don't know the reason for that. But the other thing was that children are at a higher risk of dying during famines than adults. Well, we can surmise some of those might be. Of course, they're not fully grown. They're still developing. There's all kinds of issues. But that does say something spiritually about, we don't want our children to die spiritually. We want them to excel. We want them to continue to grow spiritually and do the things that they need to do. Spiritually speaking, in a year's time, many congregations have not had Bible classes. They have ceased having children's classes. They have dismissed for a period of a year. And you and I could say very clearly that they have missed the better part of a year of being fed spiritually on what they're doing to grow in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord, at least through Bible classes that would meet on Sunday morning or Wednesday nights. So some have done more, and some have probably done less. But it is important for us to say that lack of spiritual food makes all of us as Christians weak. Another thing I thought about was that when they are like sheep without a shepherd, is that there is no order. The flock is running here, they're running there. They're getting used to doing things on Sunday afternoon, not returning on Sunday night. They're getting used to doing things on Wednesday. Wednesday's ladies class maybe hasn't been meeting. Maybe our teen group has not been meeting the way they should. Maybe Sunday night service has dwindled off to nothing or no services at all. I'm not saying that we couldn't have done anything different, but now we have to rectify the situation and help as much as possible. And I am quite frank about this. There are some that maybe have gotten really used to not going to worship service on Sunday night or Wednesday night. And so there was a recent Pew Institute survey that was administered, and as this instrument was extended to people to give their responses, the Pew Institute came back with a startling fact that of all people that call themselves Christians, and I put that in air quotes, call themselves Christians, that would be across the board, any type of religious group, said that 1/3 of the people that were interviewed said they are probably not going back to the assembly of the church at all. Now, I want you to let that set in for just a minute. I want you to think about your congregation where you serve as a shepherd. And you have a congregation of 250 people in your congregation, and you have 1/3 of those folks not return. That means 83 souls will never come again to your assembly. If you have 100 people, obviously that's 33 people that will not come. The average Church of Christ membership across the board, I'm talking average. Obviously there's some congregations much larger and there's some smaller. But on an average of 100 people, 33 not meeting ever again in that building, that's a pretty serious hit. And so if you have 500 in your congregation, that's 166 souls that will not return. And if you have 750, like we have here at the Brown Street Church, that is 250 people that have said they probably will not come back to the assembly of the church. Well, what if you have 1,000-member congregation? That is 333 people. That is 3 times the average size of the churches of Christ across the brotherhood of 100 members. So this is serious, and these are serious times that we're living in, and we need to help our brethren realize that they do have shepherds, that we shepherd their souls, that we watch out for them, that we guard them and protect them. Complacency is something that has been added to this pandemic in more ways than we can imagine. Children are home doing their public school work, doing it virtually without a teacher. Children are trying to learn the Bible virtually with a Bible class teacher, working diligently to share those Bible experiences with our children, and it is indeed hard. There are some churches that are not having evening assembly, no classes whatsoever, and it is hard, and there's no PM services, and these are, as we have said many times, are unprecedented times. If you're like me, you're a little tired of hearing that, but it is a fact. Not since the 1900s has our nation experienced anything like this pandemic. As elders, having to move forward to have a plan. And if you have not begun a plan, I want to highly encourage you that you get your heads together for several weeks and you begin to think about how do we implement this. You're probably way ahead of this since this is being taught during the second, third week of March, and you want to be thinking and remembering this. Well, there are several passages in the Bible that we all think about that are favorites of us when we think about being a shepherd, and of course Psalm 23 comes to our mind right off, and we think about Jesus Christ as that great shepherd. In Isaiah 53 and verse 6, he tells us that we are all like sheep and we have gone astray. Each of us in our own way, Isaiah says, but the Lord has caused the wrongdoing of us all to fall on him. We don't know the reason for this pandemic. There's a lot of discussion about it, and I'm not trying to point fingers at any one or any particular event. But we have had a difficult time with this pandemic. In John chapter 10, we have this wonderful passage that we call the parable of the Good Shepherd. And I'd like to read just a little bit of that today because I think it is a good foundation for us to think about in moving forward about the Good Shepherd. And Jesus says, truly, truly, I say to you, He who does not enter by the door of the fold of the sheep, but climbs in some other way, he is a thief and a robber. And he begins to set the stage for the point that he's trying to get to. And as you go down to verse 7, and Jesus said to them, I am the door of the sheep. All who come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door, Jesus says. If anyone enters through me, he shall be saved and go in and out and find pasture. When you find pasture, you find food, you find refreshing water to drink, and you grow in that regard. The thief comes only to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that you might have life and might have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd, Jesus says. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hireling and not a shepherd, who is not the owner of the sheep, behold, the wolf is coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them, and he flees because he is a hireling and he is not concerned about the sheep. We have an awesome responsibility as shepherds in the church, that we do all that we can to make sure the sheep are being fed, that they're being tight in the fold, that they're not out wandering around doing things that they should not do. Well, I grew up as a West Texas boy south of Abilene, a little town called Coleman, and I was around cattle from time to time. I was around sheep probably less than that, but I do remember some lessons that I've learned from sheep, and they are indeed interesting lessons. And I think it's a great correlation that the Bible refers to us as Christians as sheep, and that Jesus is the good shepherd. And so now we know who is the leader. We know who is guarding us and protecting us, and as elders in the church, your job is to shepherd the flock. It is to prepare the flock, to guard the flock. But what is it that we're guarding? And if this is correct, he refers to us as sheep. And I learned very early on that sheep are not very smart. I don't like to use the word dumb, but they're just not very smart. In other words, they're not the smartest animal in the animal kingdom. And as a result, they're constantly getting into trouble. There's all kinds of situations that they're involved in. And the correlation is that people are the same way. It was just like that little illustration I gave at the beginning of the lesson. Sometimes as elders, we shake our heads and we ask ourselves, how did you fall into this pit? How did you get into the situation you're in? And we scratch our head. And as shepherds, we must love the flock and encourage them. People who are away from the Lord, they just live a little differently. And it takes a little motivation and a lot of love for people to know that elders care for them and love them. It is sometimes a definite lack of understanding on the part of the sheep that shepherds care for them, and when the phone rings with caller ID today, they can just not answer your call. And it may take a knock on the door. It may setting up a special time to visit, to love on them and to hug on them and to tell them they're missed and how vital they are to the church. Another thing about sheep is they have no direction in their life. They just wander off into all kinds of situations. And we're amazed sometimes about how people get out into the grass and the tall grass, and they wander out in the wilderness for a while. We say, what were you thinking? How did this happen? But we love them, and these sheep do wander off, and we pray to God that they'll come back soon. Another thing is that sheep are defenseless. They have no real way of taking care of themselves. It's just simply true. They do not. Snakes have fangs, and they have poison oftentimes, so they can fend off, and birds have some type of defense mechanism. Maybe it's with their beak or fluttering their wings, and skunks, they have, well, you know what skunks have. They have lots of ways to protect themselves, but sheep, what do they have? They don't have very much at all in ways of protecting themselves, and so they just wander. They're defenseless, and oftentimes they're found dead. Their carcasses are found by the side of a tree or out in the pasture, and they're being eaten by the birds. But they do not have ways of protecting themselves, and by the very nature, sheep need a shepherd. That is God's plan. That is His wisdom. And I could go off on a tangent here and talk about smaller congregations. I grew up in a small church. I love small churches. Small churches can do many things larger churches cannot, and vice versa. But if a church has been in existence for 30, 40, 50 years and still a small church, you would think that some men would grow up to be elders by now. And so I want to encourage this church, whatever it is, that you would think about growing in Christ and growing up as an elder and developing into an elder. In this passage, we find that there is a picture here of a shepherd who has 99 sheep or 100 sheep, and he has 99 in the fold, but one has not come home. And of course, as a shepherd, we relate to that because we're concerned about every sheep in the flock, and so we want them to be saved. And so I'd like for us to see some personal things now about the shepherd, of who you are and what you're about. The shepherd has a personal possession. The sheep belong to them. Sheep that are in one fold don't belong to another shepherd. That's why we have autonomous congregations. This is the way the New Testament church was established. And so sheep belong to one flock, and when they began to wander, when they get out into the tall grass, they go into the world doing the things that they're doing, it is a shepherd's responsibility to leave the 99 and go and find that one and bring that person home. And so it is vital. This takes a great relationship. It may take weeks. It may take months for you to be able to develop that relationship where you can sit down and talk and be able to visit and to pray. You know, when a person is becoming a Christian, the Bible teaches that they have the Holy Spirit in them once they are baptized, and the Spirit comes to live within us. That is a great calling back home, and we need to use that and talk to sheep that are out wandering. Another thing about a shepherd is that the sheep are his prized possession. Every shepherd that I have known, every rancher that has had sheep in the past, they count those sheep daily. They wonder, are they coming back to the fold? What are they involved in and what are they doing? They are a prized possession. And when little lambs are born, it increases the number of the flock. And that's a wonderful picture to us about what happens in the church. And so every sheep is a prized possession that belongs to the body of Christ. Not only is it that, it is a precious possession. You know, in the Lord's church, there's no big sheep. There's no little sheep. They're just sheep. Every sheep in the fold is important to God. Doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes, as we say, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Those are the ones that demand more attention than others. But all sheep are created equal. All sheep are involved in the body of Christ. Every sheep was precious to the shepherd. Every sheep in the fold of God is precious and loved, and we ought to think about them that way. I'd like to talk next for an idea for you to have and to picture in your mind, is that of a shepherd who is out searching. When a shepherd is out looking for a sheep that is lost, that's gotten out or back into the world, that's left the church, has grown comfortable in doing what they're doing, the shepherd goes out in search mode and begins to make some phone calls, maybe writing a letter, a text message, or an email, and saying, I'd like to visit with you a little bit. Can we sit down and have a cup of coffee together? Can we have a piece of pie? Can we just sit down and visit? Maybe you call the place, and I'll be happy to meet with you. And maybe that's what needs to be done, and you would be willing to do that very thing. The shepherd doesn't go after the sheep in order to punish the sheep. He goes after to love the sheep back into the fold. Sometimes it is difficult when people are a little bit hard-headed, a little headstrong, as we say, and a shepherd has a more difficult time. But always remember, elders, your job is to love the church and to win the church back, those that are outside the fold, and welcome them and bring them home. You know, God treats us better sometimes than we treat ourselves. He loves us to the extent that He doesn't go after just the lost ones so He can punish them. He goes after them because He cares for them and loves them. And that has a lot to do with the method, next of all, of how an elder, a shepherd, would do that. I think it becomes your responsibility to initiate the search. We just cannot sit behind these four walls and expect a third of the church who has wandered off to just one morning wake up and say, I'm coming home. We may have to we may have to initiate the search process of getting these people back to the church. If the shepherd waited for the sheep to come home every evening, he would lose far more than just one. They would wander off with no direction. They would starve to death. They would be taken by the wiles of the world. And once that process is begun, I think it's very hard to redeem the lost. It is the good shepherd, elders, who make the first move. And whatever that process is in your eldership, however y'all do that, it comes from gathering around a table. And I believe first of all, the very first meeting when I was an elder, I wanted to do something different. Not to be different, but I passed out the roll sheet, the directory, if you will, and we took the names of every person in our church and we prayed for them by name. Not bragging, but I can't remember the last time that's been done. Elders, pray for the flock. Pray that God will open their hearts. Make them receptive to your phone call. A cold letter probably is not the best way, but it is a method. And maybe an email would be a little more personal, but a phone call. Just to reintroduce yourself and say, Bill, Mary, we've missed you. Could we get together and talk for a little bit? Whatever method you want to use, I think is important. But remember that I believe elders have to be the ones to initiate the process. And then when that process is started, he really begins to intensify the search. The verse tells us in the Bible that the shepherd went out and searched until he found the sheep. I don't think you can take a no once or twice or three times, but be very kind and gentle and loving and just leave it out there to say, when you're ready to talk, I want you to know I love you and I'm here for you. That's better than shutting the door. Now, if they say, look, we've moved on, we've moved to another city, we're no longer in close proximity to the church, and we don't want to be considered a member there anymore, that happens. But when a person is just 2 blocks or 3 or a mile from the church building, I believe that's elders' responsibilities to intensify the search and go out there. Aren't you glad the Lord did not give up on us with just a simple search? He searched intently, as this parable is teaching us. And I remember being in college and talking about parables, and I loved it because one of the things I learned that a parable says this, but it has an underlying meaning. There's something on the surface that everybody, a child, can get, but there's deeper meaning down below. And the deeper meaning to the fact is that the shepherd goes out and finds the sheep that's lost. It says that it's going to take time. He intensifies that search, goes out and works diligently at it. If he doesn't make contact the first day, the first week, the third week, to continue on even to the point where it is exhausting. And finally, maybe, just maybe with God's help and a lot of prayer, that sheep will be responsive and be able to come back to the fold. Well, time restraints are upon us, and I want to move on just a little bit. There is success for the shepherd. Some stories will not turn out well. People have had pent-up anxieties and maybe anger, and you will get an earful of those things. Well, I just don't like some of the things you men do. And then I think, listen, and listen some more. And then try to put yourself in their shoes and get a perspective on where they're coming from and talk with them and say, you know, I can understand how you might feel that way. And then you open the door for a dialogue. And then you try to persuade them what the Bible is teaching us about where they need to go. One of the things that I love about this parable is that the shepherd lays his hands on the sheep. This is a great imagery for us as shepherds in the church, or you as shepherds in the church, is that when the shepherd goes out to find this lost sheep, and maybe he's tangled up in the wiles of the world, and I see in my mind's eye at least where this real sheep is tied up in the world and maybe he can't get loose of what's going on. And so the shepherd goes over and he untangles the sheep from the wiles of the world. And maybe he grabs the sheep by its front legs and then its back legs, and he takes that sheep and he puts him over his shoulders. And he has all 4 of those legs, the 2 in the front and the 2 in the back. And he begins to walk back to where the fold is. And he's speaking to that sheep, and he's encouraging that little lamb. And he tells him how much he loves him. And maybe he's going to bind up his wounds. Maybe the little lamb has had a broken leg and couldn't walk and couldn't get back. Maybe there's something that we would say in their life spiritually is really a mess, and we help to heal them up. I have always heard that once a shepherd spends a lot of time with a sheep that has been injured and has brought it back home like that, that little lamb, that little sheep, rarely leaves the shepherd's side. Isn't that beautiful? You probably have some people in your congregation that are like that. They're the first ones to greet you. They're the last ones to say goodbye. They're the ones that write you a note or give you a phone call, and they love you. Why? Because they know you care about them. And I hope that you do, and I hope that you want them so much to be loved. And so he lays his hands on that sheep. Not only does he lay his hands on them, and I'm not saying that as shepherds we need to go out and lay hands on people like that, but I think symbolically that's what we ought to be doing. And then the second thing would be he lifts that little sheep up. He embraces him. He loves him. He tells him over and over again how much he's loved and how much we miss him, how much we want him back in the fold, safe in the arms of Jesus. He comes alongside them, and he is responsive to that love and the extension of that greeting and that little phone call. And let me tell you, elders, when you do that with people in the flock, they will go to bat for you because they know that you love them. And they will be there for you in your darkest times, and they will be there to support you in works of the congregation, and they will be your best fan. Now, that's not the reason to do it. I'm just saying that is a benefit of your loving the flock. And then the last picture I think is important is that we see this imagery of the sheep coming home to be with the Father. And when that shepherd brings that sheep home, we can just picture that joy that he has got the 99, but now he has the one that was lost, and he's coming back to the fold. And I want us to notice that sheep is not required to get there under his own power. It might be that that shepherd needs to meet them at the door and say, Bill, Susie, Johnny, whoever, sit with my wife and I today. Come to lunch with us. Come over after worship today, and let's continue this relationship because we don't want this to end just by your coming back. We want to demonstrate that over and over. Wouldn't that be a great thing, that we just continue this love feast, if you will, and we grow every single day? Well, I think there's great satisfaction, next of all, that comes to the shepherd when you as an elder have done that, and you've been highly responsible for bringing some back to the fold. I think there's a great high level of satisfaction. The Bible calls it rejoicing. I think it would be good in the next elders meeting that you spend some time in prayer and just praise God and thank him that you're rejoicing about the fact that this one who was lost has now been found and now brought back to the body. That is so vital. This is a picture of what happens when the lost sheep comes back to the fold. And I think it's vital here in John 10 that we see this and we bring this into the relationship of the church. There is a reason. Sometimes why sheep go off wandering. I want to suggest some, and maybe you can see your congregation in this, maybe not. Maybe you don't have this problem. But sometimes I think sheep feel abandoned. I actually had a woman in the congregation where I preached tell me one time, she said, when I come to this building, I feel that I am alone in a crowd of 500 people. What was she saying? She was saying, I feel abandoned. I know my responsibility as a Christian, she says. I know my responsibility of what I want to do. I want to come and sing and pray and worship and give and support the church. But when I come here, I feel abandoned. I wonder if we have some of those people in our congregation that do feel abandoned, that they're not feeling like they ought to. They don't feel that this body of Christians is warm to them. And so maybe that's what we need to work on from the inside out a little bit. And there is danger that unless the shepherds intervene in these issues, I don't see that problem getting a lot better. And so there has to be, and I hate to use this word, a program, a ministry, some vital people to help work on that. Some of your most outgoing people need to take it as a ministry, and you say, let's work on this together. employ some of your deacons. Commission your deacons to be involved in these things and to help these folks no longer feel the danger. And then, tragically, if the shepherd does not go after the sheep, he will surely die. Death can take place. Well, we know what we're talking about. Spiritually, we're talking about spiritual death, where a person has wandered away from the church so long that they've died. They have no interest in the Lord anymore. Their heart has grown hard, and the gospel message, the phone calls, do not affect them anymore. They have no need for the church because they're out in the wilderness and they're loving it. Well, sheep are not going to survive because Satan's going to gobble them up. And we have to be careful about that and make sure that does not happen. In Acts chapter 4 and verse 12, the Bible says, "And there is salvation in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven that has been given among men in which they can be saved." You know, the things of this world that pull our sheep away from the fold, many times, as I've said, are the wiles of this world. It could be involved in so many activities of the world, such as sports. They consume so much time, so much money, so much energy traveling. And we wonder, how can a family do that? But they all want their children to be normal, as we say, and involved in those things. There's nothing wrong with sports, but when it becomes God in our life, He's taken the place of God. And so we have to help our folks with that as much as possible. I don't know all the answers, but I do know that Jesus Christ said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me." That's what Jesus is supposed to do for us, and He is doing that. Many times we do not respond the way we ought to. Well, the conclusion is, where are you today as an elder, as a shepherd of the congregation in which you've been asked to serve, and you've now been commissioned by God to be the shepherd of the sheep? How are you doing in that? I'm not here to make you feel bad. I'm not here to cast blame upon you. If I had a list and said, go home and do these 10 things, you will win all of these thirds of people back to the body, I could not do that because every congregation is different. We're autonomous. We're separate, but we're together. We make up the body of Christ, but what happens here is not always what happens in your congregation. So I've always been frustrated going to seminars and someone says, you go home and do these 5 things, and you'll be a great evangelist. Well, you did those 5 things, and it didn't work out very well. Why? Because the dynamics are a little bit different. Every church is different. Oh, I understand the principles are the same, but I'm not going to give a list of 10 things for you to do. But I don't want the devil to lure you into complacency, to where you just say, well, you know, this is the way it is. This is what happens after a pandemic. We just got to roll with it. We've got to learn to cut our budget and get by without a third of the people. Brothers, do you really want to stand before God someday and say you just lost a third of the church and didn't do anything about it? Wow. Wow. That'd be the time to say, wow. No, I don't think any of you want to do that. So I'm here today to help you. And when you grow weary, I don't want you to quit. I don't want you to quit. A good friend of mine sent this little story to me the other day, and I want to read it. I hope you don't mind me looking down at my notes because I haven't memorized this. But it was written by a boxer by the name of James Corbett, C-O-R-B-E-T. You can look it up. Listen to his quote. "Fight one more round. When your feet are so tired that you have to shuffle back to the center of the ring. Fight one more round. When your arms are so tired that you can hardly lift your hands to come on guard, fight one more round. When your nose is bleeding and your eyes are black and you are tired and you wish your opponent would crack you one in the jaw and put you to sleep, fight one more round. Remembering that the man who always fights one more round is never beaten." Elders, that's what we need to do. Let's get up, dust ourselves off from this pandemic. Let's press forward. Let God give you the energy, the wisdom, the power to fight one more round and do what you're supposed to be doing. Sometimes Satan's going to come after the sheep. We need to be prepared to keep the fold safe. You know, sometimes elders have in their mind the way we picture it being shepherding the flock. We have this image in our mind of just sheep gathered together and doing what they do, And we see them just following after the leader, doing what they're supposed to do, going to still waters, going to green pastures and eating and being fed. And that's what we believe in our heart our responsibility is of the church. But sometimes Satan comes and the wolves come. And maybe I'm talking to you this morning, brother, because you look like this picture now. You look like this little shepherd who was out taking care of the sheep. And the wolves came. And you've been bloodied. You've been beaten up. You've been beaten down. And you wonder, why do I do this for the church? But then you have this one sheep that comes back and bows its head low and nudges you and tells you, don't give up. To use the analogy of Mr. Corbett, fight one more round. Don't quit. We need good men in the church today. I don't have to tell you, we're not filling churches with elders the way we should be doing, or filling our pulpits with gospel preachers like we ought to be doing. So I encourage you, do not quit. Please, I'm begging you, don't quit. Leave this seminar saying, I am going to have a renewed strength. And even though my nose is bloodied, and even though I've been punched in the gut, I'm going to keep on keeping on because that's what Jesus Christ would want me to do. Let's close with a brief prayer. Father God, I thank you today for every one of these men that are shepherding your church. I pray today that you would give them the encouragement that they need. Even when they're hurting, you would lift them up. Help them to lay their head on their pillows at night and realize that if you give them another day, they will work diligently in your kingdom. Father, I pray you'll bless them richly. Help those that are lost to realize that the shepherd really does love their soul. I pray, Father, that you'd be opening their hearts even now, that they'd be prepared for a phone call, a visit, and they could come back to you. In the precious name of Jesus, I ask. Amen.